I'm going to show you some underground comics, but first, I want to show you a pre-code horror comic that's very near and dear to my heart. Spellbound number 16 from Atlas Comics. This is issue number 16 from 1953, and it is quite an issue. It is really great. You have Russ Heath, Joe Sinnott, Victor Carabata, interior artists. The thing about this issue that makes it special for me is the fact that both Victor Carabata and Joe Sinnott signed the interior of this comic book. Yes, two pre-code artists signed the interior of this book. At the bottom, you can see Vic Carabata's signature, the bottom of the splash page, for his story, Too Human to Live. And then at the bottom of this fantastic story, Behind the Door, rendered by the one and only Joe Sinnott, he personalized the signature at the bottom of the splash page. And it is one hell of a story. But the thing about this is that it was in bad shape when I got it. Okay, it was perhaps barely a 2.0. The cover had separated almost entirely. It was just hanging on by like this much. Well, when I did my interviews for Haunted Thrills with Victor Carabata and Joe Sinnott, I brought this along, and they were gracious enough to both sign this issue of Spellbound.
The real question is this: are comic books good or are they not good?
Haunted Thrills.
I was fascinated with pre-code horror. One of the first major collections I bought was the Spokane collection, which had an incredible array of pre-code horror comic books.
Of course, doing the horror stories was a lot of fun. You could imagine how much fun it was to put these stories together, and you could do them any way you wanted.
I had no guidelines at all or restrictions. They would say to me, Ray, we're doing eerie comics. Here are the stories that are going in there. I'd look through them and I'd take things that I thought would illustrate them.
Stan looked at the letter and he says, I said, Mr. Lee, would you like to look at some of my work? He says, no, Jack says you're a good artist. He says, here, I want this back in a week.
By the time all of that was done, the cover had entirely split. Not only that, but all of the interior wraps were also split, folks. So it was a total freaking mess. You can tell when you look at it, you can see that it's well tanned. There is no doubt about that, which is also an issue. So what happened is last week I took it into the ghost clinic, okay, and we performed some major surgery on this sweet little book. And so what you're looking at right now, fortunately, is a book that has been restored and is pretty stable. It's so much better than it was. It's readable, but there was no way I was going to let this baby, lapse any further, because it is near and dear to my black heart. Okay? So that is Spellbound number 16, folks. Undergrounds, my good fiends. Underground comics. Mostly of the horror and science fiction variety. I've shown you a lot of these in the past, over the last couple of years. But first off, we have the first printing of Richard Corben's Rolf. And the back cover, which I like a lot more, that is just such a sweet back cover by Richard Corben. classic Corben. What a great story. And of course, the interior is all black and white. But man, oh man, this is one thing that Corben was so good at, was his use of zipatone. This guy was absolutely a master of zipatone. There is no doubt about that. Just incredible work from an amazing artist. And I highly recommend it if you get a chance. You know, there are reprints of this. You can sometimes find the original copies relatively cheaply. And when I say that, I mean, like, I think you could find first prints like this for $50 in really good shape, Second, third printings for $10 or $20. Really not that much. This is from 1971 from Rip Off Press. Check out this cover by Victor Moscoso for Zap Comics. Number 7. That is just freaking insane. Such a great cover. A wide variety of artists in this issue. I think Crumb is in here with Mr. Natural. Really cool story. And you may recognize that art if there are any Robert Williams fans in the chat. This is a Robert Williams story and art. Death Rattle, Volume 2, Number 1. Check out that freaking Corben cover. Killer Planet by Rand Holmes. Check out that art, folks. I'm gonna get it in there. There we go. Rand Holmes was one of the greats in the underground comic biz. And he just did some amazing stories. A lot of his art reminded me of Wally Wood. Definitely. Had that Wally Wood kind of look to it. In any case, Death Rattle. This is Kitchen Sink Press. Highly recommended. The Barn of Fear. Check out that Alfredo Alcala cover. Of course, mimicking EC Comics. Rabbit people making out in the swamp, being menaced by some type of a swamp monster on the back. Or a great one called Let's Play Chicken. And of course, it does have a horror host who's that scarecrow looking guy. Pretty awesome. That is the Barn of Fear. Enter if you dare. 50s Funnies. Number 1. This is just a classic. Yeah, Rick Veitch does this whole thing. It's kind of a bit of a takeoff, of course, on the 1950s drive-in movies and also Famous Monsters. He calls it Forgotten Fears of the 50s. Fantastic work. Once again, some great use of zipatone.